Hey everybody, and today we're going to focus on another Zinch tutorial. This will be my last Zinch tutorial for a while because I want to do some other stuff, but for this we're going to help you out with something else. So you may notice, for pink horrors, with the two of them I have an instrument of chaos, but this is a demonic icon. For the Zinch icon, it's basically like little flames around this golden thing, but for the icon we're just going to paint the flames. So, we're going to paint with the flames. So, let's get started. For this, for added control on the miniature, I'm going to use a medium layer brush from Citadel, but of course just use a regular brush around this size. So, we're going to start off with the yellow. For this, we're going to start off with a contrast paint, Cyan and yellow. So, and for the white, I base coated Cordox white off camera, but let's start off with the Cyan and yellow. If you don't have Cyan and yellow, you could have used Casandora yellow, but it's a wash, so it may take a couple of coats. And I know I demonstrated to do Warp Flame. You could do Warp Flame, but sometimes regular Zinch have regular flames instead of Warp Flame. So, let's get started. So, open the paint pot. So, we just need a little bit of Cyan and yellow. Not too much, just make sure you don't overload your brush. So, we're going to focus on the smaller flame first. For this, we're going to start right here. And being contrast paint, it does pool. It tends to pool in the recesses, so just make sure it does not pool whatsoever. Or else you'll lose the effect you're looking for. And you may notice there's some gold icons, but don't worry, we're going to focus on the flames. And besides, you can just paint those later. And we may get some Cyan and yellow on other details, but don't worry, you can just go back and paint that later on. And make sure when it pools, make sure you just poke your brush around just to make sure it doesn't pool too badly, especially on the flatter areas. There we go, that's the yellow done. Alright, so now, all we're going to do is since we're going to let that dry just for a second. Okay. So, for the flame, while it's drying, we're going to focus on different areas. So, for this, for the demonic icon, you can see the flame has like a little bit of gold pieces. We might paint that in a future video, but I'm not right now. So, while waiting for this to dry, we're going to paint the yellows. So, for this, I'm just going to grab a yellow paint. For this, I'm just going to use, Flash Gets Yellow. So, make sure, and also, when using Flash Gets Yellow, it is kind of a pale or sometimes a thick paint, so you do have to thin it down quite a bit. So let me just move my paint pot. So, put on the palette. And this is just a brush that's very fine tip. So, we're not going to highlight all of these. We're just going to gently, barely, where there's barely enough paint. So, for right here. We're not going to do this on every part of the flame. We're just going to do this until our contrast paint is dry. May take a little bit, but don't worry, that's just fine. Alright, there we go. Alright, so now what we're going to do is something a little different. So for the flame, since it's almost dry, we're going to see if I'm just going to check it real quick just to make sure it's kind of dryish. Yes, it is. So it's dry enough to where we can apply our second thing. Hold on. Just a second. I'm just trying to blow on it to try to get it to work a little quicker. All right, perfect. So it has a nice yellow tone, but now we're going to start adding the oranges. So for this, all we're going to do is we're going to start off with another contrast paint. We're going to use Gryph-hound Orange, but we're going to do it differently. So we're going to thin down, but we're going to thin it down quite a bit. Make sure you shake up your contrast paints, because if you don't, they'll dry real shiny, and you do not want that whatsoever. Okay, nice and shaken up. All right. So we have some contrast medium. So what we're going to do, going to take some contrast medium and put on our palette. And I'm going to use a medium shade brush. So for this, just take some contrast medium. It's a little chunky, which isn't very good, but so I highly recommend getting it out of the pot. I'm just trying to work with what I got. And maybe just a little more. There we go. All right, I'm going to wash off my paintbrush to make sure there's no contrast medium on there at all. All right, just always make sure you clean off your brushes thoroughly. And dry them off pretty thoroughly as well. So, now, take some Gryph-hound Orange, not very much, but you do want quite a bit where this chunky contrast medium will thin down a little more. So, all right. The reason why we're doing it this way is so we can have a nice, easy blend. It's kind of transparent like this. That's perfect. All right, so this is ill-advised, but just add a smidge of water. There we go. All right, so now all we're going to do is going to start base coat part and putting in the orange. So for right here, focus on the front, right here. Let's focus on the top. A little more water to help thin this down. And it is ill-advised to use water, but don't worry, you can also make your own washes if you add them to contrast paints. So, for this, okay, take our Gryph-hound Orange mix. So, all we're going to do, focus on the top parts. And for the other thing, just follow on this side. So, and then we're going to go on this side. All right, there we go. That's the orange part done. All right, so you could leave the fire there, and if you want to be done, but obviously fire wouldn't be done without a little bit of red. So let me just make sure my brush is washed off thoroughly. And always make sure to dry off your brushes thoroughly as well after you wash them. All right, so now we're going to take another contrast paint. For this, Blood Angels Red. So we're going to start off, shake off your paint, and make sure it's real fine. So now we're going to take our Blood Angels Red and put it on our palette. Now we're going to do something ill-advised. We're actually going to add water to this contrast paint. You may be thinking, why are you adding water to a contrast paint? Well, the reason why I'm doing it this way is so we actually make a wash, and also the blend is actually very nice between the red and the orange. A little more. There we go. Perfect. It's more like a wash now. So all we're going to do is we're going to focus on the orange parts. So for this, I'm going to add tips. So right here. And a little bit on the little guy as well. Okay, so now we're gonna obviously the only thing missing for the fire is just a little bit of black. But for this, we're not gonna use a black contrast paint because that blend would just be too funky. So for this, we're gonna use a different paint that's a lot like black, Basilicanum Gray. So for this, make sure you wash off your brush and make sure there's no paint left over. Perfect. So we're going to take some Basilicanum Gray and put it in our palette. Same with our contrast paints. We're going to add water with this just a little bit, just to make sure that we thin down our paint, to make sure that the blend is actually nice. A little more. Perfect. So what now we're going to do, focus on the tips. So for this, we're going to focus right here where the gray meets the red. As you can see, it's not over darkening, but it looks like the black smoke you see at the end of the fire, at the end of the edges of the fire. See? All right, there we go. That's our Zinj Icon flames done. So I really hope you enjoyed today's tutorial on how to paint fire, but don't worry, this will work on any other miniatures on the fire, like such as the pink horrors, the blue horrors, and some other fire models like for flamers. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Bye-bye.